Well, joining me in the studio is a man that's well known to most people on the Isle of Man, always got something to say. I love it when you follow you. You've always got an opinion about things. Juan Turner, who, of course, is wearing his Energy FM t-shirt. But you're in the papers for coming up with another radio station. I mean, really? Well, you got one? How many do you want? What's this about?
It's about content and it's about choice. What we're seeing in the UK, of course, which we've always said the UK is so many years ahead of the Isle of Man, and we sort of watch things, don't we, and we play catch up. It's about choice and giving the listeners the choice. And with the way now things are delivered digitally, people do have the choice. People can sit at home now, even in the car, and listen to a radio station in Los Angeles if they want. Mm-hmm. But there's still a will for people to listen to locally produced content. So that's the basis behind it.
Okay, so Energy, what profile, just remind me, where does Energy fit in as a profile for listeners?
Right, Energy is a chart hit radio format.
Yeah.
That's
so your younger audience?
It generally appeals to probably under 45s who like the chart format. Yeah. That's the style. It's a lot more fast moving, and it plays mainly sort of the top 40 and hits from the past sort of 20 years or so, maybe a little bit older, but generally the past 20 years.
And the new station, The Sound, is it?
The Sound Radio, yeah.
Where's that fitting in?
Right, The Sound is aimed at a much older demographic, naturally because of the music content. So, for example, there will be music on there from the 60s, 70s, 80s, a little bit of the 90s, and some of the more contemporary modern artists that people will still enjoy. Just because they're new artists doesn't necessarily mean people don't like their music. Mm-hmm. The softer artists, the likes of the Michael Bublés, for example, artists like that are releasing new material, so it doesn't just have to be golden oldies.
Right. Now, the Isle of Man's got 3 transmission stations, and I use that radio stations that transmits, let's get it right. You're going down the sort of more modern route. I'm guessing this is an internet, online, Alexa says this and play it, is it?
Yeah, well, there's 2 reasons for that. There's no reason at all why we couldn't put the Sound onto FM, for example. We'd be willing to do that.
Can you need a license?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm coming to. The point is that the station is on the air, and there's no reason from our side why we couldn't provide that on FM to the listeners if we were allowed.
But other stations have their remit for that, probably, don't they?
Well, if they do, they're certainly not providing it, are they?
Right.
Who's providing it? That's the point, and that's why we've created it.
So you think there's a hole in the market?
There's a massive hole in the market. Manx Radio does a great job of the public service remit. It's really refocused itself, repositioned itself in what it does with its public service news, information.
But the music's quite young, isn't it? I mean, it seems to me like
I honestly don't tend to listen that often to it, but when I do listen to it, it's mainly for the content and for the...
For speech, you go there for speech.
Yes. Yeah. It's very much like BBC local radio, and that's what it's there for, that's what it does, and it does it very well. What we haven't got on the Isle of Man is a radio station playing the older mix of music aimed mainly at, say, predominantly ABC One older generation.
Well, isn't that, 3FM's market?
Well, if it is, they're not doing it, because if you look at what they're playing, a lot of the time you can't really tell the difference between them and Energy. Right. They're playing a lot of chart stuff, and I don't quite know where they're meant to be sitting. I thought they were going to be playing oldies, but they seem to have changed their format and are aiming at a younger demographic, which is.
But Radar, which are not here, of course, showing that they're neck and neck almost now with Manx. They're slightly behind, but they're
I mean, as you know, Paul, I don't get excited about Radar. They interview about 10 people a week in a survey, and once you start drilling down,
that's 70 a month, isn't it?
Something really insignificant. And once you start drilling down into different age categories, the genders, and then the different age profiles, you're ending up with a very, very small sample. Okay. Radar works when you're looking at a region, like the whole of the Northwest. You can get a picture of what people are listening to, but on a local level, I've never believed in it.
Well, I mean, another route you could have done was DAB. We keep hearing about it. I know you're going to call it dead and buried, is what you keep referring to. But DAB radio never took off in the Isle of Man. And channels have got it, everyone seems to have it.
I can tell you about DAB.
Okay.
I do call it dead and buried.
Which is actually digital audio broadcasting, I think.
Yeah, digital radio. Yeah. A lot of cars now have DAB, but they also have FM.
I think they all have it, don't they, Dan?
Yeah, but they also have FM, and we were told FM's getting switched off. That's been announced recently that FM's not being now switched off. And then they said, well, when we do switch FM off, we're going to put local community radio on it. So that's not switching it off. That's moving the national networks like the BBC off FM on purely to DAB. Now, that's not going to happen because I don't think the BBC want to come off FM. But that's a different story, isn't it?
But why are we not on DAB here?
Having said that, with DAB, I've already said that if they will let us do DAB, we will put in a DAB multiplex.
The trouble is, it's very line of sight.
We will pay for it.
Oh, okay, this is news to me. Because in the UK, well, this is the Channel Islands. BBC put the Channel Islands DAB in, didn't they? And they put all these community stations on there as well as everything else that's available. Isn't that the danger? If you go onto DAB, other people can then also get onto it.
Well, it depends how many people go on. I mean, we don't want to really bore your viewers to death with the technicalities of it, but DAB is basically a whole load of stations screwed into one ball and transmitted as what they call the ensemble, the multiplex.
Yeah.
And then your radio decodes them back out to however many services are on it.
Right.
So there's a set amount of chunk. Let's use it straightforward. And depending on how many stations you put on, depend how good the quality is of those stations.
Yeah.
So naturally, you'd want the speech stations can be on a slightly less quality than the music stations. But that's DAB in a nutshell. And as I've said, we'd be willing to do it.
So why can't it be done? Or am I being stupid here? I mean, why are we so behind? Or maybe people are saying we've missed the boat anyway.
Well, because they won't let us.
Communications Commission people.
Yeah, I mean, it's all down to whenever you go forward with an idea, they say, well, that's a great idea, but then what we'll do is we'll have to ask, does somebody else want to do it?
Sure.
So I mean, if they will let us do it, we will do it.
I mean, the one thing, without blowing smoke up the thing, is that you broke the monopoly in the first place. I mean, and I was there starting at Energy FM.
Yeah,
it was amazing. But, have we got too many radio stations really now in that sense? Is the market there for you to come in with another one?
Let's look at it this way. Anyone who's got an Alexa or who's got the app in their car. I mean, I had a hire car last year. I drove down the M5 listening to Energy FM. I could have listened to something in LA. I could have listened to Radio 2.
Well, I know a lot of people like LBC, for instance.
Well, I listen to LBC.
Because now you can listen to a talk station.
Absolutely.
And,
so the fact is, have we got too many radio stations? There's probably 1 million radio stations at our disposal. What we're producing is something that has local content, so people can hear the music, but also hear the news bulletins.
Okay, so you'll take news, Manx News, like you do for Energy.
Yeah, and travel.
Do you think that where the future is on this? I mean, technically, anyone can listen to any station. Therefore, they won't necessarily have to listen to what's now transmitted on FM. Is that a sort of double-edged sword on this thing?
What you have to do is you have to put your product together, and then obviously you have to deliver it on as many different platforms as you can, so that your listener, whoever that listener is, can access it. The future, no doubt, is going to be over IP. I mean, what we've seen is a huge increase in people buying smart speakers.
Well, it's like 30% is now listening on.
It's gone up something ridiculous.
From nothing to 30% in a few years.
Yeah, and I think in a year it's gone up 30
and
something.
I'm one of them. But I'm listening only on a smart speaker these days. When I'm here.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And I'm noticing a lot of workplaces have now got smart speakers. So the old days of tuning in the radio in the corner of the workplace, the shop, the office, or wherever.
You've got to have content that appeals basically now more than ever.
Yeah, and the whole point of the sound is it's greatest hits and easy listening. That's the format. It's totally different to Energy FM. So you will get on there. You might get some classic Frank Sinatra on there.
Right.
You will get the Beatles. You will get some of the really classic David Bowie and all of that. And that's not what's being delivered at the moment.
And weirdly, by your delivery method, you actually know how many people have got that speaker on. You don't know how many listening in front of that speaker, but you do actually know numbers quite precisely.
It's quite amazing actually. The since we announced it before the weekend, we're running on test transmissions at the moment. With just sort of announcements going out that we'll be starting the programming service soon. How many people have been dipping in and out to it over the weekend when it wasn't really fully announced?
When's it happening then? When you're announcing the full?
Next week.
Yeah.
We'll be starting off with a breakfast show. The weekends will be a lot of non-stop music, but we are in discussions for some specialist shows to come on. There's a chap who's looking at doing a soul show for us on a weekend. We haven't got a time slot for that because with radio it evolves. So you constantly look at your programme schedule and change it.
with all this radio and yet no TV, don't you think this is quite? I mean, I say TV again, old-fashioned transmitted TV. Is it nothing you fancy turning your hand to as everything else that you're doing?
Well, I mean, you look at what we're doing right now, and people aren't sitting down to watch our interview at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night or
no
Thursday
more appointment
night.
of you like that.
People, and I very rarely will watch the BBC or the ITV News, but I will watch them online, and I will go into their.
So you're not saying no? You might do something.
I have to say, right now, TV is not something that we are involved in.
Any more radio stations?
I still freelance, as you know.
Yes.
For whoever will pay me.
Yeah. But that's not radio stations. You're not going to be like a global. I mean, I should say global runs every sort of radio station you can imagine in the UK, and there's other networks available as well.
There is, yeah. I mean, global are probably the biggest. Bauer have just.
Which has been sad, isn't it? Local radio in the UK has basically come to an end as we knew it. All those stations with the big names, the first 19 have all been swallowed up, really. And now commuter stations are there.
Yeah, I don't blame the likes of Global and Bauer. I blame the regulator for that, because the regulator is supposed to be ensuring choice.
Right. So if a regulator here says, Mr. Turner, we'd love you to have a transmission for your station at some point, you'd be happy to look at it?
Yeah, subject to frequency clearance, we could have that transmitted on the air within a few weeks.